listening to Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS Radio. So, hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Changing Reality. So, welcome on, welcome all. If this is your first time watching and you do not know what Changing Reality is, Changing Reality is a show that features phenomenal people from all walks of life who are, in essence, changing their own reality. So, my name is Harsha, and I'll be your host for the show. And throughout this show, you'll be hanging out as we interview amazing people from social change makers, entrepreneurs, business owners, to even artists, musicians, inspiring individuals, thought leaders, and many more from all across the world, and many of whom you may have heard of from the Pan campus as well. So, through hearing these inspiring stories on how these phenomenal people are not only changing their own lives, but changing the lives of those around them, hopefully, we'll pick up little tidbits of success or some secrets on how we too can implement these amazing words of wisdom in our day to day life and figure out how we can leave our mark in the world through a way that we are passionate about as well. And I'm someone who truly believes in the power of stories. I wanted to do this show simply because I feel like there are so many game changers out there, brilliant minds who are making waves in the lives of those around them. And I'm passionate about hearing not just how they did that, but the story behind the scenes of how they actually came to be the people that they are. Because many times we see success as something that is so far away, so hard to achieve. But many times the stories of how these amazing people started may be all we need to unlock the next step in our own journey. And just to show you how passionate I am about the power of stories, I actually personally founded and run a youth movement back home in Malaysia, where I'm from, called Ascendance, which works with not just the Malaysian Ministry of Education, but organizations across 28 countries to help provide an alternative education platform for any student out there who wants to change their reality. So we work with students from elementary all the way up to college through various sessions, programs, experiential learning activities, and projects that help them discover what they love doing, go out there and learn about themselves and the real world through real life experiences, working with top executives, startup owners, and much more, and come back and create for themselves meaningful careers that not just help them achieve goals that they're passionate about, but help the people around them too. And to date, we've been fortunate to work with over 35,000 students in over 970 communities across these 28 countries, and have incubated countless number of student-run projects and social enterprises run by students aged 8 to 25 years old. So helping everyday students change their reality. And all of this has been possible because of kind individuals who actually come on board, share their experiences, work with these kids, and truly are honest and vulnerable about the things that have made them who they are. And just like that, I hope this show gives you the same platform so that you guys, our audience here today, can take back some of this information and see how it can change your life as well. So if you have any questions about the show, if there's anything you want to hear about, if there's any topics that you want to cover, do drop it in the show chat below, and we'll take as many as we can and get to them as fast as we can as well. So on to today's speaker. We have someone who is absolutely, truly, truly phenomenal. And if many of you are like me and maybe watched TV once or twice when you were kids, you may have recognized it. Or if you're a student at Penn who also has been recently on the campus going to some of the events, you may have actually heard him speak at the Wharton campus as well. So today's speaker is none other than an actor, author, journalist, and much more. He's currently a financial news reporter for Insider, formerly Business Insider, covering Wall Street and investment banking culture. And among his most recognizable credentials, he as an actor, he actually acted on the #1 Nickelodeon sitcom iCarly, and has been featured on its hit spin-offs Sam and Cat, and also its remake. So if you guys remember the amazing character Nevel from the show, well, he's actually the actor behind the scenes who brought the character to life. Other than acting, he's actually the author of a cookbook, Cool Bites, 100 nutritious, delicious, and family-friendly dishes that was endorsed by President Clinton in a quote printed on the front cover as well. And he has actually done so much as a celebrity chef, actor, as a youth, and and went on to actually have an amazing career, inspiring so many other youngsters, just like me, watching at home from TV. And today he actually is a journalist. He's worked at some of the top news centers that you may have heard of, such as BBC Radio. He was a contributor on other places as well, from Huffington Post to even CNN. And today, he also is our speaker for today, sharing his experiences, not just in all three of these things, but also his story on how he actually discovered his passion and continued in a career that has inspired millions. So, without further ado, let's welcome onto our virtual stage, Reed Alexander.
Hi
Well,
there.
Hello. So, how are you so far? How's your morning? Like, did we interrupt an important day for you?
Not at all. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Harsha, for having me. It is a little bit after the Thanksgiving holiday, and I was able to see some family today. And I'm here in Palm Beach, Florida, where I've been spending the holiday. So I know that we're in different parts of the world. But no, it's good here, and I'm absolutely delighted to be with you today on the show. Thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And you're someone who I think our audience is definitely familiar with. And you've been inspiring all of us since before, I think since we were kids. And one of the things that I think like that I love the most about your journey and your story is that you started as a kid as well, like much younger than I think most of us did. So is it true that your acting career actually started when you were like 8 years old?
That is true. Yes, you have your facts correct. I can confirm. Yeah, when I was 8, I was very young. I was growing up in South Florida. My parents were lawyers, so nothing to do with the entertainment industry. But
A
I
little
knew
bit different.
I,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. But I knew that I wanted to be on a stage. I always had a passion for doing school plays, and I went to this school called Pinecrest School in Boca Raton, and we had a really great drama program. And it really spoke to me. I enjoyed it. I felt like that was my calling, and I convinced my parents to give me a chance, and they were kind enough to support me in that effort. And from age 8 to age 18 or even 19, honestly, my freshman year in college, I was acting. So 11 years of my life. But yes, it did start when I was very, very young.
And I'm going to be honest, as someone who loved the drama program at my school as well, nobody called me for any auditions, so I won't hold it against you. But
Oh.
how did you even get into like the whole industry at only 8 years old? Was it like, I don't know, someone came for a play and said, this person is amazing, they're going to like win the next Oscar, we have to like have him on our show? Or was it something that you had to go out and find yourself?
Yeah, excellent question. And I wish that somebody had said that. It would have made my life much easier. No, nobody said that. Sadly, I'm still waiting for them to say that. No, it was something that I needed to go out and find for myself. I was auditioning and volunteering to do the school plays at this Pinecrest school that I was telling you I attended at that age, but I wasn't really doing anything professional. And then at the recommendation of our drama coach, who just recognized that I had such a passion for acting and really could go far with this, I decided to do some research. I mean, bear in mind, I was 8 years old. I was a very like type A, only child, but I decided to do some research onto like talent agents, that represent actors. And I Googled, I mean, I think we had Google back then. Gosh, this is 18 years ago, almost 2 decades ago. That's insane to me. Some of your viewers might just have been born around the time that this was happening. And I did some research into talent agents. And, because my mom had been an attorney and worked from home a lot in the afternoons, I would hear her on the phone. So I knew kind of what to say on like a phone call or a professional voicemail. And I think I just kept it really high level. I just said, I'm looking for representation. Please give me a call back. I didn't tell them that I was 8, didn't tell them who I was or why otherwise I was calling or what kind of projects I wanted to do. I just kept it vague. And then my mom came home from work one day and she heard on her voicemail a lot of messages, a lot of return calls from these agents who said, we received your call and we understand you're looking for representation. Call us back and, maybe send us a headshot and resume through the mail. Because back then, 20 years ago, people weren't using email in the same way to send along their CV or their headshot. So at that point, I was 8 years old, like brokering these relationships with these agents who had no idea who I was. So my parents decided to sit me down and we had a really serious conversation about my wanting to do this. And they said, look, if this is what you want to do, we will support it. That they had a proviso, which was that if it ever stopped becoming really fun for me, I would get out of it. And I think that was a really healthy way to look at it. Acting is competitive, just like professional, sports or team sports that kids do. But there's a lot on the line, and it's such a public forum, the entertainment industry, that I think it's important to have checks and balances in place. And I would say to other parents and kids out there considering doing what I did, if it stops becoming fun, maybe it's time to make a switch. And to be honest, that could be said of a lot of things. But I wasn't a mid-career professional where it's harder to switch jobs. Luckily, I was 8 years old at the time. So if it suddenly became not a great fit, it would be easy to get out of. So that was how we started it.
All right, that's absolutely insane. And I'm just saying, like right off the top.
I know. Listen, I don't disagree with that statement.
But I love the way that your parents like receive the news, and I love that condition. And if it's not absolutely amazing and fun, stop doing it. I think that's amazing, and I hope that I get a lot more voicemails from 8-year-olds who want to do amazing things, and I hope that 8-year-olds out there are motivated, or however old you are, to go out there and actually just take that first step. And you actually end up like pretty successful, like doing like looking for representation. You started, I think, even then, like appearing on short films, TV movies, and you even landed a role on, I think, a very popular show, Will and Grace.
Yeah,
And
right.
there you even were nominated for awards. You even received an award. All of this, I think, as a very young kid. How was it like going from a normal child? I'll use the word normal, if you were at one point, and not incredibly successful since then. But anyway, from a normal child to someone suddenly thrown into kind of like the spotlight and all of this fame and glory kind of like cropping up at such a young age.
First of all, you're very kind, Harsha. Thank you. Okay, so what I would say in reaction to that is the question is, what's it like going from kind of a normal life to, then being in the public eye? I guess I've been really lucky because everyone who's followed me is really sticking with me at this point in time for my current work and what I do as myself, because I've been out of acting for some years. And of course, we'll talk about it. And I returned this year to iCarly for the revival of the show. But really, aside from doing that, I had been very clear that I wanted to pursue a new path, which was journalism. And that's what I'm doing now. So I've been doing that for about 5 years. And everybody who's stuck with me over that 5 years, I think is really stuck with me because they've been generous enough with their time to support my present work as a reporter. But I really had it good. I mean, back then we had a wonderful cast, crew, great working environment, which is really half the battle. And like most of what you can ask for is just to have colleagues that you like and a work environment that you like. But I met so many viewers of our show out in the world when I would travel, when I would go to the Kids' Choice Awards, which I was, fortunate to be nominated for. And I just felt like the show meant so much to so many people. They would say to me, this show has changed our lives. This is a big refrain that my colleagues and I hear a lot, which is, you made our childhood, or you changed our childhood. And I don't take that lightly. I think that's a very big honor and a very big compliment for people to say that. There's a lot of content out there in the world that people can watch. So the fact that they felt that connected to the content that we were creating, which we had a lot of fun doing, it's a great gift. So, I've never once regretted it. I'm so grateful that I'm here. I'm so grateful that I had the push of that platform. And now we'll see what I sort of end up heading toward next. But no, I've often thought about how lucky I am to have been selected to be on that show, and how, it's changed almost every part of my life.
Very, very cool. And like on the topic of your shows changing lives, like I remember watching iCarly as a kid with my sister, and this is so embarrassing. And please, nobody ever check this out, because we actually tried to make our own web series and our own website. I'm sure you get like a billion kids who do that.
I want to see that.
But the story is we did that as children, and like many years later when we became entrepreneurs, today we actually have our own web series and I actually do websites professionally with the startup that I run. And like I just thought back like a few days ago when I was thinking of iCarly, and I was like, gosh, those seeds were planted from that one show that we used to watch. And it's in a way, without me even knowing, defined my whole career ever since then. and I still make references even when my website work, when we do fast simple websites. I always say I tried to make a website when I was a kid, and this was this kind of stuff. And I realized all of that actually came from iCarly. So very embarrassing. Nobody ever Googled that up, but that's
I
how much.
know what I'm doing when we finish up
No.
this interview. I'm checking it out. No,
And
what I would say is I think you're really onto something, which is the show had tremendous success in the years that it was on the air. And if you think about it, it debuted in 2007. It's now 2021. That's 14 years ago, which is mind
now you're
blowing.
making me feel old. Oh gosh, but okay.
How do you think I feel? It's now been about half of my life, not quite, because I'm going to be 27 in a few weeks. When I'm 28, I guess that'll have been more half my life. But the point being that the show I think was so successful because it was empowering to people, young people, in that they could have their own platform and their own voice. I mean, if you think about Carly, Sam, and Freddie went from anonymity, right? They were just kids in Seattle. Really, I mean, in the show, not the actors. I mean, obviously they were out there doing things. I'm talking about the characters. Carly, Sam, and Freddie were ordinary kids. And then they created this web show, and suddenly they became a household name and had this big platform. So at that time, it was a really cutting edge idea. And I do think it said to a lot of young people, you can have a voice on your own. You can take it for yourself without it being given to you. And I would never compare a TV sitcom to social movements of a generation. But if you look at the social movements that have defined this generation of young people, they've been very much driven by active members of the Gen Z community who are speaking up and speaking out and saying they're going to take back their own voice. And 30 years ago, 40 years ago, that might have been more difficult. But now it's easy to do by starting an online platform like the kids on iCarly did. And I also think the show is kind of ahead of its time, because now think about what kids are doing. They're on TikTok, they're on Instagram. Really, no, I really mean this. They're making
You're
videos.
onto something.
They're producing videos, they're producing content. 5 years ago, it was YouTubers who had a web show. iCarly planted the flag first, right? It was like the game of capture the flag. They captured the flag first in the civic conversation around young people having a digital presence. And 14 years later, that's where the civic conversation is. Young people online creating their own presence on social media. So I do think that part of the success of the show was that we got there first. And yes, the writing was really sharp and the acting was good, but we also dominated the civic conversation in that day, because prior to our show, I don't think the idea of kids having a web show was like a household concept. And then, a few seasons in, it was.
You are absolutely right. And I think a lot of people who are using the online world is kind of like a platform for their own shows, for their own messages. Even this show, like, oh gosh, Inception moment. But but I think all of it was in a way kind of reflective to the fact that we all grew up seeing that this was possible, and then that seed kind of got planted in all of us. So you're 100% right on that. You also, during the time that you were on the show, had your own platform talking, I think, about healthy living, or healthy and nutritious cooking as well. You're an author of a book. You had a platform called Cool Bites as well. So how did that come about, and how did you even kind of meander into something that was your own, something that you were passionate about, and actually went on to be extremely successful? I think even your book was endorsed by President Clinton. It's gotten so much traction, and I think it's definitely helped people think about things especially kids, like healthy food that they would have never thought of before. So how did that even begin? And were you also inspired by iCarly? I've got to ask.
Yes and no. That's a good question. I think I was, insofar as I could have my own, vehicle and platform, which was sort of the message of iCarly, but I was mostly doing it as a blogger and less so as like a videographer or having a video platform. I mean, we definitely did video, and what I ended up doing a lot was mostly going on TV news shows during those years. So, to give people context, from 2009 to, I guess, 2014 or 15, about 5 or 6 years, I was very much in the food space. This is before I went into journalism, what I do now. So I guess I've had 3 chapters of my life. There was a big chapter dedicated to acting. And during the time I was acting, part of that was devoted to food and lifestyle. And then since then, it's been journalism. But what I would say is that, I created this food platform, this food website where I was sharing recipes. And originally, the reason it started was because I was living in California and I was going to online high school. And if I wasn't on set working with friends, I was usually home or just kind of hanging out with friends. But I'll be honest, like I had moved to LA. I didn't really have a huge life there in the beginning. It took time to get settled. So one of the things that I did was to cook. And I turned to food as a way to be in the kitchen, make recipes, be creative, explore. And I was probably 13 or 14 at the time when I was starting this. So it was mostly my parents being taste testers. But I always really liked cooking. And when I had been in school, I had watched the Food Network just for entertainment and found it to be like watching like Friends on TV, just close friends that were making delicious things I wanted to try. So I decided to spend more time tinkering in the kitchen. And the result was I started this website where I shared healthy recipes that I was creating, really clean, really nutritious, but they were easy and they were affordable. And the reason I started it was because it had helped me to kind of take control of what I was eating. And I thought, there's a lot of other young people out there who could benefit from this kind of material. So I started this really simple blog. I mean, it was nothing fancy when I started, and it was like just recipes. And within weeks, it started getting so much attention. I was thinking, why? And I realized it's like with journalism, when a story really blows up that we produce on the site, because I work for Insider now, sometimes we have stories that are mega successful. What it means is we've tapped into something that is like going on in the civic conversation, something people are thinking about, something they're talking about. We've identified an area of tension that's on their mind. And we've done our job as journalists, which is to be heat seekers and to figure out where's the heat and then go in there and write a story. So it was sort of a similar phenomenon with this food platform with Cool Bites. I think it blew up because people out there, it was at a time where it was the late 2000s and people recognized we had a big problem with childhood nutrition in this country and people needed resources where they could turn to as kids and parents to get healthy information. And what set my platform apart was it was from the perspective of a kid like them. So I'm happy to kind of tell you what happened next, but to summarize, I started this food blog and it really, really worked. And, it kept me busy for 5 years. It became like another career.
Okay, you can't just say, I would love to tell you what happens next and then not tell us what happens next because and again, I think you're someone who probably should be split into three and have three separate interviews. But no, I'm just saying, it's like three very distinct careers. It like did you just pull out of a hat the three most random things and said, you know what, I'm gonna like use my life to connect these things. But anyway, absolutely amazing, and I think you definitely went on to have success as someone in this space of healthy nutrition as well. You were an ambassador for, I think, the then First Lady Michelle Obama's program that actually emphasized or kind of like brought awareness to this topic as well. How is it like now doing something a little bit different as you kind of like got a little bit older, as you were starting to kind of like move into college and all of that, and or at least high school in a way, and like now be someone who people look up to and people look to for like not just on the show as like an actor, but as an activist in a way.
At that point when I was, doing my food side? Yeah, no, excellent question. You're right. So I did partner with the Clinton Foundation and with the First Lady, Michelle Obama, who at the time was running her Let's Move campaign. And these organizations were really champions of healthy living for young people. And what happened next that I was sort of teasing was just, because of the enthusiasm around the site, I started going on television all the time as me, instead of going on as an actor playing Nevel. It was really my first opportunity to do a lot of live television and news, particularly. I was going on the news as myself. So I would go on CNN or the Today Show, BBC, London Radio, where I went on to be a contributor, local news channels. I was in the newspaper, the Associated Press. I mean, I was constantly out there talking to reporters and sharing recipes and sharing healthy living advice. And I was very proud to have done that. I did it for 5 years. I probably went on live television, 100 times, and eventually became really comfortable in front of a camera as myself. Whereas before I kind of had a shield. I was my character when I would go in front of the camera. It wasn't necessarily me. I was going on as a different person. But now I didn't have that shield. I was just going on and being vulnerable and talking about my own story. And I found it really connected with people. I heard from a lot of people who would write me, email me, young people particularly, that they were trying the recipes. It was really cool. It was like it was probably the closest I've come to starting some sort of movement. But I gave it my all. It was just my, everyday focus. I traveled this country. I spoke at schools. It was a terribly exciting time. And then, from there, I think I recognized that journalism was what I wanted to do. So we'll get into that. But to answer your question, I think there's a new responsibility that comes with being yourself. As an actor, we play parts that are written for us. So there's a huge element that we have to bring to the part, to bring the words off of the page and bring them to life. And we have to be able to partner with the writers because we also have a view on what we think the character can and should be. It doesn't mean that we're right. The writers are going to ultimately make the decision. But we have a sense of, I'm playing this person, I'm saying the words, I'm the closest person to this person because Nevel is me, right? So I need to be able to speak up and say to my producers and say to my creator, I think the part should be like this, or I think that line is wrong. Like, let's tweak this a little bit because, that's coming out of you, but you're still not yourself. Like people only see you playing the character. When you do become yourself, there's a great sense of responsibility, I think, that comes with that because people are now associating with you for you. And you do hope that you're putting out a positive message in the world. We need more positive messaging going on. We need more responsible leadership. And I knew that young people would associate with the show and probably with me because I was talking about issues that were salient to them. So I just really tried to put out the best material I could and exemplify what I thought was a good way of leadership and a good way of being for that generation and never take it for granted. I would meet so many of them, and I still do. I meet so many viewers. I mean, you wouldn't believe. And I just really try, even though I'm in a new career entirely, to be as grateful as I can be and to exemplify as good and trustworthy leadership as I can be. And hopefully be aspirational for people because there's so many people that I aspire to and that have been mentors to me and that I look up to. So because they exemplify those good values and I look up to them, I want to do the same for other people.
Absolutely phenomenal. And I'll get back to asking the question on journalism and I think the whole third chapter of your life shortly. But pausing here for a moment, I think there's one question that I really want to know because it shocked me very much, which is how do you stay so humble and so grounded? I mean, you seem like an actual human person with a lot of things that you want, which I feel sometimes we don't see when we see on TV. We see people who are larger than life, and then you actually have taken all of the success that you've had and use it as a platform for good, for actually going out there and doing your part in changing the world. And you do it with so much humility, so much passion, and I think that's something that anyone who in this generation who aspires to achieve something hopes to be able to do. But at the same time, we also see many people who burn out being in the public eye, or they don't actually maybe have the right environment, or they are unable to kind of keep their feet on the ground, or they get lost in themselves. And we see this at a small scale on a day-to-day basis with many people struggling with mental health. We see this on a larger scale, and you've somehow navigated that amazingly, and today give back to the community. What's your secret in a sense?
That is very nice of you to say. Thank you. Well, first of all, I mean, I truly appreciate what you're saying. I think what I would say is what I do now is such a human job. I, as a journalist, have had to take on the mantle of living a life where my function is to observe and to highlight, by definition, other people's stories. So my whole way of being is almost centered around what other people are doing, if that makes sense. And then finding what I think is salient. I mean, there's a great deal of me involved in this equation because I'm choosing what I think is important to put in front of readers, but inherently, I'm not writing a script or coming up with a world as I see it. My job is to immerse myself in other people's existences. So if I wasn't incredibly fascinated by what other people were doing, I'd probably not be very successful at what I do. So I think by definition, you need to go into that with a really like non-selfish mind, if that makes sense, because that's the whole job. The other thing is, I mean, I've spent a lot of time in my life researching and writing about mental health. Right now, I'm a Wall Street reporter, as you pointed out. But prior to that, I was covering mental health. I was on the mental health beat. And I spent a lot of time talking to mental health counselors, clinicians, doing research, reading. I mean, I would read like cognitive behavioral health manuals, dialectical behavioral health manuals. I'd watch videos because that's what I needed to do to be successful. And along the way, I really learned about the human psyche and kind of the psychological like mentality of a lot of people. And it made me certainly, I think, have a stronger emotional intelligence quotient, EQ. But I would also say it made me more empathetic, and it made me realize how widespread mental health struggles are in our world. I apologize if I'm not sounding very, polished with this, because I guess I'm thinking it through as I talk to you, and this is really a very honest, sort of vulnerable answer here. But I think that my fascination with mental health, it underpins almost everything for me. I mean, it was probably even very involved in what I was doing in food, because I was trying to give people a lot of confidence and empowerment. And a great deal of that is derived from one's mental well-being and cognitive well-being. So I guess as far as staying humble, it's just recognizing that nobody's better than anybody else. I really do try to read as much as I can read and immerse myself in other people's lives and find the fascination in their life. And I also just have this ethos that, like, we're all learning. It's a big learning journey, being on this planet. And journalism, I think, is such a celebration of that. Our job is to educate. It's to learn. I learn every day in this job. I think it's the celebration of the human spirit. So I guess I try and be as humble as possible, because I feel like when you're not humble, you have sort of like a wall between you and, other people. And that wall impedes the transmission of information from them to you. I mean, certainly from you to them, but then you really can't learn anything, because you're going in with an attitude that you don't have anything to learn from them. You're sort of above them. I actually go into the attitude in every situation, because of what I do as a journalist, where my life is centered around others, that there's something I can learn from every situation. And if I do that, it will really benefit me, whether it's in my journalism, in my personal life, in problem solving, in critical thinking. It should have a material benefit. So what's the point of not being humble? Because that's only going to slow down what I want to do, which is this learning. So I guess that's what I'd say. Does that make sense at all?
I think it makes absolutely like a lot of sense, and I think that journalists or not, it's something that we can all do, and something that I think if we do in every aspect of our life, I think it just brings up our well-being as well. So thank you.
100%. 100%. No, I agree with you. I think everybody should be humble, and I think everybody should spend some time asking themselves what they can do to benefit their community. I really think that. I mean, I feel like my job is really a public service job as a journalist. I think we're trying to educate. We're trying to provide information for the benefit of the ordinary public. I spend so much time thinking about my readers. And the people that I'm writing for and about are people who are in the investment banking world. And I'm typically writing about younger people. And they often don't have much agency or much of a voice. They're overlooked by management in their banks. They are written off as, just there to do work, like grunt work on deals. Investment banking, a lot of your viewers are probably going to go into investment banking if they're at Wharton. And I met, a big constituency of Wharton students recently when I had the privilege of going there, who were going to go into banking. And 50% of the Wharton undergrad population is going into banking. 30% goes into, it's true. No, really. And 30% goes into consulting. I mean, that is real data that I have. So the point is, a lot of these people early on in their careers, they don't really get any special attention. They're just kind of assigned to work on deals. My view is, like, I can use my platform to give them a voice and to give them agency and call out struggles they're going through or feature their stories. And it's the part of my job I enjoy the most, is finding these hardworking kids and giving them a platform. And I think you have to go in with an open mind around humility to be doing that. And certainly they've taught me a lot. So, I am so grateful that I'm here in this job. because it's enriched my life in manifold ways.
And I guess on behalf of all Wharton undergrads and my fellow classmen, thank you. And thank you for not only speaking to us and taking the time to constantly come and share with us, but also for the work that you do in kind of like, as you said, 80% of people go into this industry or adjacent to that. And I think that definitely your work in uncovering the culture, the kind of like behind the scenes of that is extremely important. How did you discover this niche in journalism? I know in the beginning of your journalism career, you traveled around the world, BBC London, CNN Hong Kong. The last we spoke, you spent some time in Southeast Asia as well. And you did this in kind of like the beginning part of your career. How did you go about like entering journalism in the first place? You spoke a little bit about why you started, and maybe you can build on that for us so that we can see how this whole career kind of like came to where you are today.
Yeah, 100%. Probably the most natural place is if I take you back to my early days in the industry, and we can kind of work up to, where I am now. When I was in college, I went to NYU when iCarly had finished. And during the first year, freshman year, I was still working for Nickelodeon a little bit because Sam and Cat, which was the spinoff show with Ariana Grande and Jeanette McCurdy, had started. And I was on that show. And then I was still out promoting my book. In fact, my book that you mentioned, the cookbook, the book published the first day of my freshman year in college.
What? Okay, that is insane. But like,
Crazy.
how do you feel going to college with that not being the most exciting thing in your day?
It was nuts. I mean, it was kind of difficult because my first semester, I really wasn't there. I would try and go when I could, but luckily NYU was really flexible with me. And I was able to travel widely in my first semester so that I could be on the book tour. And that was great. But what I would say was I really wanted to be a student, and I wanted to be there because my high school years were done on the show and I was filming the show. So I wasn't really in a classroom with young people. I was with my classmates who were on set, right? Like the other actors, we were all studying together, and then we were castmates. But I didn't really have like a prom experience or a high school experience. So I thought, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to try and make this as normal an experience as possible. And journalism was my major. And I thought, if I don't love this, because this is what I knew I'd wanted to do by watching the news. I'd always been a news like obsessed person. And remember, I was going on all of these news shows around journalists. And I thought they had the coolest job ever. So in high school, when I was meeting them all, I was like, that's the job I want. They get to meet fascinating people. They get to be at the center of news events. They're on the front lines of whatever's happening. Think about it. Journalism is like, this is not a great example, but bear with me here a little bit. If the world is like a party, and the reason I say it's not a great example is because unfortunately, there's a lot of struggle and strife in our world. This is not an equitable world. Tragically, it is not an easy world. A lot of people are marginalized. A lot of people right now are suffering in a terrible way. This pandemic has just, I think, shown how inequitable the world really is. So that's why I'm loath to compare the world to a party. Bear with me here in a rudimentary way. If the world is like this big, busy party, because there is a lot of fascinating stuff going on, the journalist's job is to be at the center of the party, not to make it about them, but to be right there in the middle to observe all the cool stuff happening. And I thought that is the coolest job ever, because no matter what's happening, the journalist has to be on top of it. The journalist has to be there. The journalist has to be talking to the people who are in the center of the crowd. And to me, I was never looking for like a ton of attention, but if I was able to have a public facing platform in journalism, which I do, it's a pretty public industry. We're putting material out there for a huge number of people. And I got to meet and talk to and spend time interfacing with information from very smart, talented, accomplished people. I thought that's like the best job on the planet. I have to have this job. So I thought, let me major in this at NYU. And if it doesn't work out, then I can always switch to screenwriting or acting or whatever, because they had a great drama program. Meanwhile, it turns out I absolutely loved it. So by the end of my time at NYU, I had gone to CNN International in Hong Kong, as you pointed out, where I was a reporter. All throughout that time, I had been a contributing reporter to BBC Radio, going from New York to London twice a year, and every week talking to my British colleagues on the BBC about US stories. So I was already in college starting to develop a little bit of a platform to tell stories. And then from CNN, spent some time in Asia, I really covered world news there. Then I went and joined, the Wall Street Journal Digital Network. Spent a year there covering millennial startups, so a lot of VC-backed startups and younger people who were starting their own businesses. And I think it was through them that I actually developed a real fascination with mental health reporting, because people don't realize, but the entrepreneurship world, it's so interlaced with mental health, because mental health becomes really fragile for a lot of people. They're judging themselves based on the valuation their company gets or the amount of capital they're able to raise from investors. And it sort of becomes a popularity contest. And I thought, gosh, of all the stories, those are the ones that I am actually most drawn to. So I spent a year covering mental health after that. And then at that point, I took a step back and I said, I want to enhance my education. I went to Columbia University for my master's in journalism. And then last summer, I joined Insider. So I'll stop there. And I know I've been talking a lot, and obviously let you ask any questions that you feel like asking based on that. You are in charge of this convo, or I can tell you why I chose covering Wall Street, because I realized that probably surprises a lot of people that I went from iCarly to covering investment banking. But I'll pause there.
I mean, when we hear the whole story, it makes lots of sense. But definitely, I did a double take when I first saw that. But anyway, I completely agree with what you said, and I think I completely agree. And I specifically love the part you mentioned about mental health and entrepreneurship. Those are the two things that I personally am extremely passionate about. That's the reason I started my whole social enterprise, because I felt like entrepreneurship is such an amazing vehicle to help people literally create something new, create something that's out of the system, do what they love, but at the same time, there's, as you mentioned, the whole riddle of kind of navigating that in a way that is that you don't just, I would say, fall into these traps of mental illnesses, but also how you use it as a vehicle to enhance your mental wellness. And that's the whole thing that I do. And I just, hearing someone else talk about it is extremely, extremely refreshing. And it was extremely, I think that just is the power of journalism to kind of bring attention to things that people feel are important and that maybe are overlooked by the vast majority. And on that topic, for my fellow friends at Penn, definitely Wall Street culture is something that also I feel falls in that category. Something that's so important, that is so overlooked, or people just don't even know about it, but is something that if can be addressed, if people can take a look at it, it would help so many thousands of people, and would have a huge ripple effect as these people grow up in their careers. How did you mentioned you were at Columbia, which is similar to Penn in the sense that a lot of people, I feel, go into the whole trek of the finance world and all of that. How did you kind of recognize that this was an issue that you wanted to be at the center of it? This was something that was important to you to find out more about.
It's an excellent question. And you're right. Columbia sends a lot of people to Wall Street. And Penn, the reason I was so enormously honored when I was asked to speak there by the Wharton Undergraduate Finance Club a couple of weeks ago is because Wharton is really seen as a beacon in my industry of thought leadership, of intelligence, of drive, ambition, training, really good training, and innovation. Wharton is an engine for innovation. And when I was asked to speak there after covering financial services, and I had interviewed executives and senior level people from the University of Pennsylvania who were involved with, financial services recruiting, what have you, I realized that it would be just a huge gift to have the chance to meet those students face to face that I was writing for, who will go on into the industry that I'm writing about. But the way that I came to covering financial services, I think it's important to say, I didn't grow up, as a stock market junkie, or really even with a great deal of awareness about how finance worked. I didn't really have to. It wasn't my world. I was already set on my path in acting. I never thought I was going to be a banker. Had I not, I often think about, had I not gone into acting at all, I grew up in Palm Beach, Florida. I went to a really, really competitive pressure cooker of an elementary school, that Pinecrest school that I told you about, which I loved, but sends a lot of people into financial services. A lot of my classmates, a lot of my classmates from a young age that I still am friendly with and talk to are in finance, so I had seen it, right? And I just through my parents as attorneys, we knew a lot of people in business. So I often wonder, if I'd never gone into acting, would I have known about journalism? I hope I would have found it, because It's the vocation that I love the most. But had I not found it, would I have been a banker? Would I have been a lawyer? Like, I think about this. I think we all think about this a little bit, like what my life would have been if I had gone different path. Unfortunately, I took this path because I'm pretty happy here. And I think that's the greatest measure of success. But I had gone to NYU, I had gone to Columbia, and I did have so many friends who were going into finance. And I knew that I didn't want to cover acting. I think like a lot of people might think if I was a reporter and then I had been in popular culture and left pop culture behind, that maybe I would cover pop culture and that I would cover actors or cover directors. And I'll be honest, like I do think that would be fun. You know, I think that would be an interesting career. I have friends that do that and they're very, very good friends of mine. But I always was drawn more to like hard news, you know, industry or breaking news, or to be honest, you know, war, like significant trauma I covered a lot. Not because I find that like a rush, because I find it so important that it's like it's something you have to do it. I feel like if I don't do it, who's going to do it? So I covered the Parkland shooting a lot when I was at Columbia and before when I was at Dow Jones. And there was a big movement that came out of that, the March for Our Lives movement, to try and regulate gun control in America. So none of this was finance related, but when I was in graduate school, I had a chance to choose any topic I wanted to report on when I graduated, because I was going to take a job out of Columbia in a newsroom somewhere, and I was able to choose where did I want to apply and what did I want that job to look like. And to me, the job that I was really drawn to was in digital writing, and Insider was clearly the company that I wanted to be at because I had read Insider. I was in Insider. This is so funny. 10 years ago, they did a really awesome piece called like A Day in the Life. They still have that series, A Day in the Life of just whomever. And they did one on me, you know, so for the past decade, I've known about Insider and I've loved Insider. So I wanted to be there. And one of Insider's original sections was their finance section. And I thought it was really smart. And having so many friends that had gone onto Wall Street, I thought, you know, look, I love mental health reporting. And I actually really enjoy writing about early career people, like younger people. So I thought, nobody's really doing this. Nobody's covering mental health and young people in the industry that so many of my friends went to work for. And I would be at dinner with these friends of mine, and I would listen to them talk about private equity and banking. And this is, I mean, 5 years ago in undergrad, maybe more. And I had no idea what they were saying. I did not understand what banking was. I didn't understand what private equity was, but it sounded cool. We had friends that went into consulting and they would talk about like traveling for work. And I was like, that sounds really awesome. So when I had the choice of what to cover, I thought maybe I should finally cover all of these lives of people that I know that I've been drawn to. And it was kind of like the thing that I told you about with NYU and journalism major. I took it on trial. And if I didn't like it, I could pivot. Meanwhile,
it wasn't fun anymore. Pivot. Yeah.
No, that's a lesson for people is, and you know, you need to make those decisions early. I don't think that people should be like walking out of an opportunity a few weeks in. And to be clear, like I never would have left Insider, but it would have been clear within 3 to 6 months if I was really jiving with the Wall Street beat or if it just wasn't for me. And if it wasn't for me, which it certainly was, which I think is a cool thing, because growing up as a kid, I never would have expected to do this, and I actually love it. But if it wasn't for me, like, then you need to pivot, right? And you can't wait forever, because then you get stuck in something, and then you're just, like, resentful. So I went in with an open mind, but I thought, you know, if it's really not a fit, I love journalism, I'll just choose a different topic. Well, it turns out I found it fascinating, because I found what I consider to be the mouth of the river. In global business, in global economics, banking and Wall Street are connected to every part of our, these pillows on my couch, for all I know, are made by a private equity firm or an investment firm that backed the pillow manufacturer that I cover, the private equity firm. So the point is, like, it's connected to almost everything that goes on, and we're not always cognizant of that. But I also thought there was a huge opportunity. There was a lot of white space, so to speak, to cover diverse, cool young people who were making a difference in financial services or their mental health related stories, and put that on blast and say, let's have a conversation about mental health in banking or about mental health in consulting and financial services. And, you know, that's what I've been doing for 18 months. And it was a pretty special moment to come to Wharton. I will never forget this, but I walked into it was called the Ambani Auditorium in Huntsman Hall. And I was so thrilled to be there. And I walked in and it was a pretty full room and people started applauding. I mean, it was just the most amazing thing. And I thought how fortunate I was that my writing, which I've been doing during COVID from this living room in Delray Beach in Palm Beach County in Florida, has impacted people like that. It was beyond anything I've done. I mean, it was just such an amazing feeling. And I just realized the power of what we do, how it can impact people. And I was talking throughout the course of the night about stories that were sort of my greatest hits over the past year. And I talked about mental health stories. And I would say 75% of the questions that students asked about were mental health related in banking, which shows you the outlook and the attitude of other young people right now toward mental health.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I've learned at Penn is that, yes, everyone is headed towards this industry, but as you mentioned, mental health is still something that I feel is very innate to almost every Gen Z out there right now. And it's something that we want to champion, we want for ourselves, we want for others. And I think for you coming like into this space, which I know so many people who are passionate about, who love this, but often nobody talks about the mental health in there. I think that you really fill that niche of like what people want to know about, at least at Wharton and Penn. So thank you. And like kind of like moving a little bit further into how you kind of like positioned yourself as the to-go person in this like particular like topic in a way. I think you chose like, did you choose like from the list of the hardest things to write about and then just try to like combine like the which combination looks like the toughest? Like I will choose mental health and Wall Street and like the financial like those are not easy topics. It requires a lot of research, and I've read some of your work. They're really, really well thought out. You're putting your best into it. You have like such an educated opinion on it. How do you even go about learning all of these things as someone who did not particularly major in finance and all of that, and then like is someone who's so strong in this topic in a sense, and today actually is so well versed in it? I mean, as someone who came into Penn not knowing anything about like finance and like the investment banking world, and then just from the conversations you have with people who are in those majors, I sometimes lose my brains and feel like they're being melted and are slowly dripping off the floor. So like how did you go about like putting in like really getting into the midst of this industry? And because that definitely does reflect in your work.
Well, I appreciate that so much. That's very, very kind of you to say. So the first thing is I read like an inordinate amount. I read so much. I read every day. I force myself to read even when I don't want to read because it's that learning. I'm learning about not just a topic, but I also read to interrogate how journalists tell stories. How do they put it together? How do they choose the intro? How do they frame this issue? And I don't read always thinking everything I read is going to be great. Like I look at it and interrogate it and say, what could have been done better? Or what are the holes in the way this person thought about something? So I just read so much. I read financial news. I read mental health news. I read general news. I read magazine features. I read books. I read so much. So you really need to just read. So that's the first thing I would say. The second thing is I watch videos. I'm a very visual learner. So I watch a lot of videos on YouTube about financial concepts. When I started out covering finance, I really didn't have a huge like lexicon or vocabulary for a lot of the terms. So I would hear a term and think, okay, I need to understand what that is. And I would go and watch a video and read something and try and do both so I could fully understand it. And I would teach myself. And I'm sure people don't always use those tools in college, but I remember my undergrad days, we used videos, we read things, we read news articles. That's how you learn. So I'm trying to replicate that. So I read and I watch videos. I would say these are very difficult topics. Mental health in and of itself is a hard topic, but in some sense it's everywhere because every person on the planet has their own mental health experience. Not everybody on the planet has a banking related experience. So I need to find those constituencies where those experiences are. The other thing to remember is financial services is an industry that's very guarded. If I were covering, entertainers, they're somewhat more open, to speaking to the press and telling their story. When I was covering entrepreneurs and like VC-backed millennial startups, those people were more open to talking about their story. Financial services, not so. They're more guarded. There's not a huge benefit to them all the time to be talking to the press. There can be, and I want them talking because I want to be able to provide insight and smart thought leadership to my readers. And that means going to the newsmakers in finance and asking them what's on their minds and then presenting that for others to benefit from. But, they are traditionally somewhat more guarded. So you need to accept that going into it. Now you take two topics, though: financial services, which is guarded, and mental health, which is mired in stigma, unfortunately. Put them together. That is really tough. That is really tough. Fortunately, my greatest ally has been young people, my sources. I make it an effort. I try and meet multiple new sources and new people every week in financial services. And young people are really like my beacons. They are the lanterns that light the way for me. I talk to them and I ask them, what issues matter to you? What do you think about the framing of this idea I have for a story? And they may say something interesting that they've seen or observed, and it informs my reporting, and it shapes and kind of provides parameters and guardrails for what my story ought to be based on what they're seeing and hearing. So I think the greatest teacher, aside from reading, aside from watching videos, aside from picking up books, and aside from thinking critically about this, is talking to sources and hearing from them and letting them guide me. And that's ultimately what journalism is. You should constantly be talking to sources and letting the reporting that you get by talking to people out in the world gather what I would call storifying, which is putting the story together. Let that guide it, and then I try and guide it by just leaning into the reporting. I try not to have too heavy of a hand of deciding like, this is what the story should be. I would much rather sources tell me what the story should be, and then I'm just here to reflect what they're telling me in a smart, critically thought out way. So it's not easy, but it's so worth it. And when I hear the reaction that people have had to the mental health stories or to my stories about, pay raises on Wall Street, which, by the way, like I covered aggressively this summer, a huge news cycle, which was all of the investment banks raising their base compensation. I don't see that as just a compensation story. I mean, of course, it's a financial compensation story. I see it as a reaction to mental health issues within the banks and suffering and exhaustion and people quitting, which are driven by poor mental health, poor mental well-being. So I cover those stories in a similar way because I think they're inexorably linked. And, it seems to have had a broad appeal to a lot of people.
Okay. All right. Absolutely. Like you put it in an incredible way. And I really think that those things that you outlined, again, it does not just go for journalism, does not just go for those trying to get into and learn about something, but I think it's something we can apply in everything that we're approaching in life. The getting the information, the gathering it, the speaking to the people on the ground, absolutely brilliantly set out. And unfortunately, we're coming to the end of our conversation. As I said, you should be split into three people and allow me to interview each of the three. But unfortunately, I have yet to invent that technology. But as we wind down our conversation today, maybe you can share with us one story or one experience in covering something that had an impact that even you didn't expect, and kind of leave us with how that impact has kind of continued on in the work that you do to inspire you to move forward.
Could I share two very quick ones that are
No, go ahead.
Two quick ones. So one of them is from March. A big topic in banking this year has been, junior bankers and burnout, feeling burnt out during COVID, burnt out working from home, and a document leaked from Goldman Sachs that was made by junior bankers there, blowing the whistle on burnout. And it was widely covered everywhere. But we had covered it, I think in a really smart way. And then I actually was able to uncover a second document that nobody else has obtained, to my knowledge, until this point in time. And I reported the second document, which established that burnout and mental health struggles were being felt by investment bankers in April last year. So the first document that widely came to attention was made in February 2021, so February of this year. But last year, at the beginning of work from home, this other document I obtained established that burnout was rife at the junior levels. And I wrote that story, and I just showed that, senior investment bankers were aware for a year that people were suffering. And I got so many calls from that story after I wrote. It was very hard to obtain that document, I have to say. It was really, really tough because it was not publicly out there. We had to, have it sent to us and then verify it. But people called me. Somebody called me and said, "You're giving us hope," who was an investment banker. "Please don't stop reporting this," which I thought was so meaningful. And then a second story I did that I was really, passionate about was really the intersection of mental health and banking, because a former investment banker had left the Swiss bank Credit Suisse, and he struck out on his own at age 32 to start a treatment center for people suffering from mental health illnesses and disorders, with a focus on providing mental health care for young people in banking and financial services. And I thought that was brilliant, and I wrote that story and kind of broke the news of what he was doing. And I got calls from people, my sources in banking, who told me about their mental health struggles that they would never talk about publicly, but told me, and that they had read the article and were so moved by it. And I realized, like, a huge part of what we do as journalists is just to remind people they're not alone in their experience. Like, it's happening elsewhere. They're thinking something, they're feeling something, they're struggling with something. It's happening broadly. And writing that story about that investment banker striking out to start that mental health treatment center, and seeing how many calls I got from other young people talking about their experience, reminded me we made them feel that they were not alone. And that is a huge part of this job. So those are two stories that I'm proud of all my work. Like, I really look back on it and feel very, very strongly about it, but those stand out to me.
Well, I can see why, and I can definitely get how amazing that must have been, not just for you to receive those calls, but how therapeutic it must have been for those people to read like what you wrote and actually see like some their struggles reflected. So absolutely brilliant. And to kind of like end off our session, one of the things, and my final question, promise, fingers crossed, but I think one of the things that is so fascinating about your journey is throughout your career, you seem to do three things, which I call the triple threat in any career. You achieve success, you're successful, but you also do what you love, and you were very passionate about the things that you do. And at the same time, you have a huge impact on those around you. You actually change lives. For
Thank you.
anyone at home who, whether they're an 8-year-old who wants to do something, or a college student who's thinking about the whole world ahead of them and confused where to even start, what are your words of wisdom for us to navigate and figure out what we love doing, and how do we achieve that triple threat in our life in a way?
It is achievable for everyone who is willing to shoulder all of the rejection. And the reason is, and really, and this is a big topic. The fact of the matter is, success is like launching a rocket ship. It is. And it's so hard to overcome the pull of gravity and the weather and the winds, and there's a storm, and there's an issue technically. What enables the rocket to get off the ground is the brilliance of science and innovation behind it, and the willingness of people who are part of the flight crew and the technical team to wait it out for the right moment for liftoff, and to keep pushing, and not to let 10 aborted attempts deter them from pushing toward the one to fire the ignition and to punch it and turn on the engine. Success is like that. Nobody became successful overnight. And if they did, it probably won't last very long. Sustainable success comes from having the ability to take the chinks in the armor and to deal with rejection that is rife, because most of us get rejected early on. The rejection gets less the more you get higher into the atmosphere on your ship. But when you're at those low levels and you're just starting your journey, there's a lot of rejection holding you down. And it's easy to feel like, I don't have it in me to overcome the pull of gravity of this rejection. But if you keep pushing, if you ask yourself, is there one more thing I can try? I was told no by investors. I didn't get this job I wanted. I didn't have the opportunity to write a source because someone won't give me an interview, write a story because I can't get the interview. If you say, what's one other thing I can do right now to try? That doesn't work. What's one other thing I can do? That doesn't work. What's one other thing I can do? Suddenly that works. I promise you that rocket ship for almost everybody makes it into the upper atmosphere. It might not blast out of the galaxy, but it certainly gives you enough success that you will look down from the stratosphere and see a beautiful view beneath you and say, look what I accomplished. I really made it into the stars. I reached the constellations. But that only comes from being willing to overcome the pull of gravity by being able to handle rejection and keep pushing forward, and not just handle rejection and say they were wrong. Ask yourself, I don't agree that they rejected me and that was the right decision, but what can I learn from it? Because you will become a savvier pilot of your rocket ship by interrogating what you can learn from each experience and then readjusting your path of flight. And that's how you'll reach the stratosphere. I believe that in my core. It's always served me well. And I face plenty of setbacks. And then I say, what's one more thing I can do? What's one more thing I can do? And eventually something works. But you have to have the stamina to keep doing it. And you have to be willing to know that you're like, you need to also be looking down the road. There was an interesting quote in a movie I really like called Shang-Chi. I don't know if you saw the new movie Shang-Chi. It's an awesome movie. It's a really awesome movie. And, you know, the other character, I can't recall her name, who's played by Aquafina, who's just incredibly talented, is like learning to shoot bow and arrow. And this woman says to her, if you aim at nothing, you hit nothing. And it's true. A lot of people are just kind of like wandering about, you know. You need to be aiming at something and know that many of your arrows won't hit. It's a similar principle with like the rocket. You need to be aiming for the stratosphere, but also be willing to kind of be creative in how you get there. But you need to be looking up. So those are some things I would say. And I think that is what will benefit people if they follow that advice.
That was a beautiful analogy. And I think listening to your whole journey, listening to kind of like that to top it off, you have definitely inspired me at the very least. And I'm definitely sure our audience feels the same way. So thank you so much. You have been an absolute joy to talk to, and this has honestly been one of my favorite conversations and my favorite interviews to date. So thank you so much for being on the show, and we really appreciate not just you being here, but everything that you've done for the Wharton community, the Penn community as well, and for the larger world in sharing these stories. So I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as well.
I had a blast. I think you had amazing questions. Such a privilege to be asked to be on Changing Reality. And I'm a fan. I cannot wait to see whom you interview next. And you are a rock star. So thank you for the confidence in having me on today.
Well, thank you so much. And to our audience today, thank you guys for watching. This has been Changing Reality with the amazing Reed Alexander. And if you guys like today's show, remember we're on Thursdays at 10 p.m. ET. And see you guys next time. So this is Harsha signing off. Bye.
You're listening to Changing Reality. Changing Reality, where we bend reality all across the world. Only on WQHS Radio.